My son's monitor shrieked beside me, his tiny chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven bursts. Owen's face was pale, too pale for a 5-year-old boy who had been laughing just 3 days ago. The doctor had already explained everything. The surgery needed to happen soon. Without it, Owen's heart valve would fail completely. I had called my mother the moment we arrived at Hartfield Private Hospital. She came, I'll give her that. She walked in wearing pearls and a pressed coat, looked at the machines surrounding her grandson, and turned to me with calm, flat eyes. "We're not spending that kind of money on this," Helen said. I thought I had misheard her. I actually turned around to see if she was talking to someone else. My brother Stephen stood just behind her, arms folded, jaw set. He didn't flinch. He didn't disagree. "They just bought a yacht last month," I whispered. "And that was a smart investment," she replied. "This isn't." My hand started shaking. That was the moment I understood I was completely alone. My name is Alara Vance. I am 31 years old, and I grew up believing that being part of a wealthy family meant being protected. My parents, Helen and Edward Vance, built a real estate empire in Connecticut over 30 years. We had houses, cars, connections, and a name that opened doors before you even knocked. I gave up a great deal to stay close to that family. I turned down a job offer in Seattle when Owen was born because Helen said family should stay together. I trusted her. I structured my entire life around a promise that was never real. Just 48 hours before Owen's monitor started screaming, we had all been seated around a long dining table at my father's 60th birthday dinner. The wine was expensive. The laughter was easy. Edward raised his glass and said, "Family first. Always." I believed him then. I had always believed him. Now I was begging them to save their grandson, and they had walked away without looking back. The doctor's name was Dr. Harmon. He pulled me into a small side room just off the main corridor, away from the noise of the ward. His voice was gentle but serious, which somehow made everything worse. "If we don't operate within 48 hours, he said, Owen won't make it." He slid a printed estimate across the table. The number at the bottom made my stomach drop. It was more than I had in savings, more than I could borrow quickly, more than I had ever held in my hands at one time. I stepped out and called my mother again. The phone rang 6 times. No answer. Then I opened my phone and saw it. Her latest social media post. Champagne glasses catching afternoon light. A private jet window behind her. My father's arm around her shoulder, both of them smiling wide. The caption read, "Living beautifully." I stared at that photo for a long time. Something inside me went very still, and then very hard. I sold my car first. It was a practical sedan, 3 years old, nothing special, but it was mine, and selling it felt like cutting off a limb. I posted it online at midnight and had a buyer by morning. Then I sold my jewelry. My grandmother's bracelet. The pearl earrings I wore to my college graduation. A gold necklace Owen used to tug on when he was a toddler, pretending to be a pirate. Each item brought in a little more. Still not enough. I called my landlord and asked about my apartment lease deposit. He was kind enough to release it early. I transferred it to the hospital account the same afternoon. I was still short. Not by a small amount, by a painful, humiliating amount. That night, I pulled a chair beside Owen's bed and held his small hand in both of mine. His fingers were cool. His breathing was too shallow. "I will not let them decide your fate," I whispered. "Not them. Never them." I went home late that night to gather documents, insurance papers, account records, anything that might help. Owen was stable enough for me to leave for 2 hours. I sat on the floor of my apartment surrounded by old folders, searching through everything I owned. That is when I found it. Tucked inside a brown envelope at the back of a filing box was a bank statement for an account I did not recognize. The account number was different from any of mine, but the name printed at the top was mine. Alara M. Vance. I stared at it for a long time. The statement showed regular transactions going back 4 years. Transfers in and out, always in round numbers, always tied to the same business reference code, a code I recognized immediately. It was my family's real estate company. I had never opened this account. I had never signed anything for it. But someone had used my name to do something. And whatever it was, it had been running quietly for years. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with the bank statement in front of me, reading every line until the numbers blurred. I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, but I knew enough to know it mattered. By morning I was back at the hospital. Owen's condition hadn't changed. Around noon, someone knocked on the doorframe of his room. I looked up. It was Darian Cole, a former colleague from a financial consulting firm where I had worked briefly before Owen was born. We were never close friends, just two people who respected each other across a shared office. I hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. "I heard what happened," he said simply. "I'm not here to make this complicated." He set a coffee cup on the side table. "I just thought you might need someone who wasn't going to walk away." I looked at him carefully. "No strings," he added. "Just help." I didn't trust easily anymore. But I was out of time, out of money, and completely out of options. I nodded slowly. "Okay." I showed Darian the bank statement that same evening. I watched his face as he read through it. He was quiet for a long time, turning the page over, checking dates, tracing the business codes carefully. "This account is legally in your name," he said finally. "Every transaction on here, whoever made them, did so using your identity." "I never authorized any of this," I said. "I know." He set the paper down. "But legally the account belongs to you, which means the funds currently sitting in it technically are yours to access." I understood what he was suggesting. It wasn't a clean decision. It wasn't the kind of thing I could make without feeling the full weight of it. But my son was lying in a hospital bed, and the people who should have helped me were posting vacation photos instead. "If I do this," I said slowly, "what happens?" Darian met my eyes steadily. "They notice. Eventually. And when they do, things get complicated." I looked down at the statement. "Things," I said, "are already complicated." The next morning, I sat in front of Darian's laptop in the small family waiting room on the second floor. The hospital hummed quietly around us. A nurse passed the open doorway. Someone down the hall was crying softly. My hands trembled as I worked through the bank's identity verification process. It took 2 hours, 3 phone calls, 2 forms of identification, and a notarized statement confirming I was the account holder. But it worked. When the transfer confirmation appeared on the screen, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow and relieved at the same time, like someone who had done something they couldn't take back but couldn't regret either. I forwarded the confirmation to Dr. Harmon's billing office. 20 minutes later, his assistant called. "Mrs. Vance," she said, "we're scheduling the surgery for tomorrow morning." I pressed the phone against my chest and closed my eyes. Owen was going to get his chance. But I also knew without any doubt that my family would notice. And they would come. They took Owen through the surgery doors at 6:45 the next morning. He was wearing a small hospital gown printed with blue rockets. The night before, he had asked me if rockets went faster than race cars. I told him yes, definitely. He seemed satisfied with that. As the doors swung shut behind his bed, I stood completely still in the empty corridor. No family beside me. No hand on my shoulder. No one offering coffee or telling me it would be okay. Just the sound of my own breathing and the soft beep of machines somewhere far down the hall. I thought about my mother's words. "This isn't a priority investment," and felt something settle inside me, cold and final, like a stone dropping to the bottom of still water. I didn't want them there anymore. Even if Helen had walked through those doors right then with apologies and checkbooks, I wouldn't have wanted her beside me. Not after this. Not ever again. I sat down in a plastic chair and waited. The surgery was estimated to take 4 hours. At the 2-hour mark, my phone rang. It was Stephen. I stared at his name on the screen for 3 full rings before I answered. "What did you do?" he said. His voice wasn't panicked, it was controlled and sharp, the way it got when he felt threatened. I had heard that tone before, usually in arguments about money. "I paid for my son's surgery," I said. "You accessed a company-linked account without authorization. My name is on that account, Stephen. That's not the point and you know it." A pause. I could hear him breathing. "Mom is furious. Dad hasn't said anything yet, which is worse. You need to reverse the transfer and we'll find another way." "Another way," I repeated slowly. "Like what?" "Another champagne flight." He went silent. "My son is in surgery right now," I said. "Don't call me again unless you have something worth saying." I hung up and turned my phone face down on the chair beside me. An hour later, an email arrived from the Vance Group's legal address, the same firm my family had used for 30 years. The language was formal and cold, full of phrases like unauthorized access, pending review, and potential civil liability. There was no mention of Owen. Not one word about the surgery. Not a single line asking whether he was alive or in danger. Just legal pressure, wrapped in professional language, aimed at pulling me back into line. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and looked out the window at the gray morning sky. A pigeon sat on the windowsill outside, completely unbothered by everything. Something shifted in me in that moment. Not anger, I was past anger. It was something quieter and more permanent. A decision being made somewhere deep inside, below the reach of fear or guilt. I stopped feeling like their daughter in that waiting room. I stopped feeling like someone who owed them anything at all. From that moment forward, I was only Owen's mother. That evening, while Owen was still in recovery, Darian returned. He had spent the day making quiet inquiries through financial contacts he trusted. What he brought me changed everything. He laid it out carefully, the way someone does when they want to make sure you understand before you react. The account in my name had been used for 4 years as a quiet buffer. A place to temporarily hold funds during property deals that couldn't go through official channels without triggering regulatory flags. My family had opened it under my name without my knowledge, likely using documents I had signed years ago for other purposes. If this ever went before a financial regulator, Darian said, it wouldn't be your name that got damaged. You're the victim here. The paper trail leads directly to the Vance Group. I sat with that for a long time. I wasn't their pawn anymore. I was, without ever having chosen it, their greatest vulnerability. Everything they had built, the reputation, the empire, the image, could unravel the moment I decided to speak. Owen opened his eyes at 7:18 in the evening. Dr. Harmon came to find me in the waiting room. He was smiling, a real smile, not the careful professional kind he had worn for 2 days. The surgery went very well, he said. He's asking for you. I walked into the recovery room and sat beside Owen's bed. His face was still pale, tubes still attached, but his eyes were open and clear. When he saw me, he reached out his small hand. Mom, he said, his voice rough from the anesthesia. I'm here, I said, holding his hand gently. Right here. He asked if he could have a popsicle. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days. Sitting there beside him, something became very clear. I had walked into that hospital as someone desperate to be saved. I was walking out as someone who had done the saving. I didn't feel like their daughter anymore. I didn't need their approval or their version of family. I felt steady. I felt dangerous in the best possible way. 3 days after Owen's surgery, my parents appeared. I was in his room helping him with a puzzle, rocket ships, which seemed fitting, when Helen walked through the door. Edward followed close behind, and Stephen stayed in the hallway, looking at his shoes. My mother was carrying flowers. Pale pink roses still wrapped in the florist's paper. She held them out with a soft expression I didn't recognize at first, because I had never needed to study it before. Then I placed it, it was the look she wore in photographs. The performed version of warmth. We were so worried, she said. I looked at the flowers. Then at her face. Then back at Owen, who was watching his grandmother with wide, uncertain eyes. I didn't say a word. My silence seemed to confuse her. She set the flowers on the windowsill and smoothed her coat. He looks well, Edward offered quietly. I nodded once. I didn't thank them. I didn't invite them to sit down. I simply waited for them to say what they had actually come to say. They waited until Owen fell asleep before Helen spoke plainly. She lowered her voice and moved closer to the window where I was standing. We'd like to help with recovery costs, she said. Medications, follow-up appointments, all of it. We want to take care of that. I looked at her carefully. And in exchange? She didn't blink. You return what you took from the account and sign a confidentiality agreement acknowledging it was a one-time error in judgment. Not an apology. Not one question about how I had managed a loan for the past week. Just a transaction. The same cold logic she had used in this very hospital when Owen was fighting to breathe. I looked at my sleeping son. Then I looked at my mother. I smiled politely. It was the calmest I had felt in days. No, I said. Helen's expression shifted. Just slightly, just enough for me to see the confusion beneath the composure. She had expected guilt, gratitude, surrender. I had none of those things left to offer. After they left, I began working quietly and carefully. Darian had given me a small notebook. Every evening after Owen fell asleep, I opened it and wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, amounts, conversations, the legal email, and my mother's exact words both here and on the day they walked away. I wrote it all in plain language, the way you would explain something to a complete stranger. I wasn't planning to expose them yet. I wasn't sure I would ever need to, but I had spent my whole life reacting to my family, rushing to please them, adjusting myself to fit what they needed, absorbing their decisions like they were facts about the world. That was finished. I was not reacting anymore. I was building something quietly, steadily, brick by brick. A record, position, a version of myself that could not be pressured into silence with flowers and legal language. For the first time in my adult life, I was several steps ahead of my own family. It felt unfamiliar. It also felt completely right. Owen was discharged from Hartfield 11 days after his surgery. Dr. Harmon gave me a careful plan, medications twice daily, a follow-up in 6 weeks, no strenuous activity for 2 months. Owen took this news seriously and immediately began planning which board games would fill the time. The week after we came home, Darian connected me with a financial services firm looking for remote consultants. It was contract work, reviewing investment disclosures, preparing client reports, nothing glamorous. But the pay was fair, the hours were flexible, and every dollar I earned belonged entirely to me. It was the first time since Owen was born that I was building something without my family's shadow over it. I worked mornings while Owen slept in and afternoons during his rest periods. I was careful and focused. Slowly, week by week, I started feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Solid. Like I had real ground under my feet again. No strings. No control. No one telling me what the family needed. Just me, my work, and my son. 6 weeks after Owen's surgery, I received a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. Not my family's usual attorneys, but someone new, hired specifically for this. The letter claimed the account I had accessed was under legal review. They were attempting to have my name administratively removed from it and have it reclassified as a company asset. I forwarded the letter to Darian. His response came within an hour, 3 words. They can't win. He was right. The account had been opened under my name using my identification. The bank's own records showed me as the primary holder. No secondary authorization had ever been formally filed. My family had set it up sloppily, because they never imagined I would ever find it. When the bank's formal ruling arrived 2 weeks later, my status as account holder was confirmed completely. I called Darian when the letter came. He laughed softly. They're not angry anymore, he said. They're afraid. I already knew. I had seen it in my mother's eyes the day she brought flowers and I said no. Fear looked different on Helen, but I recognized it clearly. It did not come from me. I want to be very clear about that. 2 months after Owen came home, a regulatory inquiry landed on the Vance Group. A government financial oversight body had flagged several property transactions going back 3 years, irregular fund movements, inconsistent reporting, accounts linked to undisclosed parties. The same patterns, the same reference codes I had seen on my own bank statement. I had not reported anything. I had not sent a single document to any authority. But I had spoken carefully, vaguely, to a former colleague who worked in compliance consulting. I hadn't shared documents. I had only asked hypothetical questions about situations that sounded a lot like mine. Sometimes that is enough. Sometimes the right questions, asked to the right person, shake loose things that were already ready to fall. My family had operated in that gray zone for years, confident that no one would ever look closely enough. Now someone was looking, and they didn't know exactly what I had. But they knew I had something. Stephen came alone. No lawyers, no parents, no prepared speech. He appeared at my apartment door on a Tuesday evening with his hands in his pockets and dark circles under his eyes. I had never seen him look like that before. He was always polished, the kind of person built for boardrooms and controlled environments. Standing in my doorway without any of that armor, he looked younger. Much smaller. No lawyers, he said. Just talk. I let him in. I didn't offer anything to drink. He sat on the edge of the couch and leaned forward. The inquiry is serious, he said quietly. We need to know what you've shared. I haven't shared anything, I said. He looked up. But you have it. I didn't answer. I looked at him steadily and said nothing. He swallowed hard. Help us fix this, Alara. I sat quietly. I thought about Owen in that hospital bed. The screaming monitor. Helen's calm voice saying her grandson was not worth the money. Then I said nothing at all. After Stephen left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I turned everything over. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with a clear and steady calm I hadn't had before. I thought about what had changed and when. A year ago I would have rushed to help them. I would have told myself it was what family did. I would have made myself useful again so they would smile at me and include me in the dinner table photographs. That version of me was gone. What I understood now, sitting in my small quiet apartment with Owen's drawings taped to the refrigerator and my own paycheck deposited in my own account, was that my family had never held the power they believed they had. Their power over me had always been borrowed. It only worked because I kept returning it to them over and over by needing their approval. I had stopped needing it. And without that, they had nothing over me at all. They had never understood that. Now they were beginning to. I agreed to meet them, but on my terms. I called Stephen back 3 days after his visit and told him I would come to the family house the following Saturday morning, with 3 conditions. No attorneys present, no recording devices, and no interruptions while I spoke. He agreed immediately. That alone told me everything about how frightened they had become. I spent the next few days getting clear. Not rehearsing speeches, just reviewing my notes, confirming with Darian that everything was properly secured, making sure Owen was settled with my neighbor Paula for the morning. The night before the meeting, I sat on the edge of Owen's bed while he slept and looked at his face. His color had fully returned. His cheeks were round again. He had started asking when he could go back to the park. I thought about the version of him that gets to grow up free. Grow up knowing his mother fought for him and did not fold. Then I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. The Vance family home had always made me feel small. High ceilings, expensive furniture, everything arranged to remind you of what they had. Walking through the front door that Saturday morning, I noticed none of it. Helen and Edward were seated in the formal sitting room. Stephen stood near the window. They had arranged themselves like a negotiation. I sat across from them, placed my hands flat on my knees and looked at my mother. You called my son a bad investment, I said. No one spoke. I'm not here to destroy you, I continued quietly. I won't take anything to regulators. I won't speak to the press. That's not who I am. Helen's shoulders dropped slightly with relief. But I will never save you, I said. When this inquiry deepens, and it will, I won't speak against you. But I won't speak for you either. You chose what mattered when Owen was in that hospital bed. Now you live with that choice. The silence that followed was complete. That hurt them far more than anything else I could have done. The regulatory inquiry ran for 4 months. I watched from a careful distance as the Vance Group's reputation shifted. It didn't collapse all at once. There was no single dramatic moment. It was slow and thorough. Business contacts grew cautious. Pending deals stalled. 2 long-term partners quietly moved their investments elsewhere. My parents hired a crisis management firm. Stephen gave carefully worded statements. The family name held on, but with visible effort, which was its own kind of damage for people who had spent 30 years making everything look effortless. Without my support, there was simply nothing strong enough to make the question stop. I didn't celebrate. I didn't send messages or make calls. I lived my life and let time do what it does to things built on weak ground. Edward called once during those months. He didn't ask for help. He simply said, I'm sorry, Alara. 3 words. Quiet in years too late. I told him I heard him. Then I said goodbye and went back to the kitchen, where Owen was waiting for me to help him finish a puzzle. 8 months after Owen's surgery, I took him to the small park 3 blocks from our apartment. It was a bright October morning. The trees were turning, and the air had that clean, sharp smell of the season changing. Owen ran straight for the climbing structure the moment we arrived, his laughter carrying all the way across the park. I sat on a bench and watched him. We didn't have luxury. We had a 2-bedroom apartment, second-hand furniture, a tight monthly budget, and a good doctor on a payment plan. We had board games and Saturday mornings and a refrigerator covered in rocket ship drawings. We had enough. More than enough. My family had every beautiful thing money could arrange, and when it mattered most, they had chosen to protect it instead of us. I had nothing, and I had chosen my son. I opened my notebook on the bench and wrote the date at the top of a fresh page. New client notes. My consulting work was growing steadily, and I had things to do. Owen called out from the top of the climbing structure, waving both arms like he was flagging down a plane. I waved back with my whole hand. That was all I needed. That was everything.